Goldman Sachs has released a report that's titled 2 Decades of Freedom. It's a comprehensive look back at the last 20 years in South Africa, and joining us is the man for Goldman Sachs in South Africa, Colin Coleman, managing partner here, head of the South African Office and Investment Banking Division for Sub-Saharan Africa. Ooh.
What a title.
My goodness, Colin. I thought you were just like the boss of Goldman Sachs in
Just
SA.
busy.
Yeah. How come such a long title?
You simplify.
And you won't talk to me about Abel either. How's it? He comes here, sits down, says, I'm not talking about Abel.
Not talking about Abel. Maybe we can try. Shall
we swing it in at the end?
Yeah.
Maybe we will. But this is a good report. It's well done in spending so much time analysing it.
Thank you, yeah.
It's about time, I guess, we looked at things in perspective.
Yeah, look, I think there's a bit of a hysterical, emotional debate that's happened in South Africa over the last very short-term period. And so we felt it was a good moment, particularly with April 27, 2014 coming, to look back at the 20 years and ask, in the Nelson Mandela South Africa, so what has South Africa done with its freedom in the past 20 years? And it is quite a remarkable picture that emerges.
We had a report that Pravin Gordon, who was with you this morning, presenting these results, said that South Africans lack hope. Where does he get that idea from, or was he quoted out of context?
I think possibly he was effectively saying that South Africans, when they look back at the history, have lots to draw on. I mean, the things that come out of the report are extremely strong, and therefore, in looking back over a longer period of time, perhaps there's some perspective, and that perspective gives you a lot of hope and inspiration for fixing the things that remain.
Sure, but that's not saying we lack hope. We've got lots of hope.
I think maybe the way it was relayed to you, you journalists get it in a truncated headline form.
I think we need that 2010 fever back, where everybody was quite excited. But looking at some of the cons, and not the cons, the positive stories, the pros that came out of this. So our GDP tripled from what your research revealed. Not only that, but inflation fell from the average of 14% to around 6%. And also the dramatic rise in the emerging middle class.
Exactly.
In a nutshell, how did we do this right in order for us to also maybe learn certain lessons from there in order to fix what's not right with the economy at the moment?
Look, it's quite remarkable when you look back at 94. We had a bankrupt state. We had junk investment grade status, credit rating. We had a very small economy, and we had some very worrying fiscal ratios. And so the fiscal and monetary authorities and the government as a whole has done a tremendous job in turning that around. So today we've recorded 3.3% growth rate through that 19-year period. We have a $400 billion economy. We have a very deep financial market with the JSE. And we have a significant rise, as you say, in the consumer environment. Basically, in the last decade, 1 million per year coming into the middle to income, to a higher income brand over the 10-year period. So I think it has been a combination of various things, but certainly the support by the government at the lower levels for the 16 million who live in poverty with cash grants, social service delivery that's taken place in that period has supported that constituency. The wage inflation has been a real 3% through the period, and the combination of that and social grants has assisted the rise in the middle class, and obviously the generation of empowerment plus the public sector transformation, which has seen effectively more black South Africans going into the public sector, and that being a salaried employment group has supported this creation of this middle class. So you effectively have this lower income group being supported, you have this middle income group emerging and being supported, and actually white South Africans have done quite well. We've had about 500,000 people emigrate in the period, but for those that have stayed, there's been a migration upwards as a post-apartheid dividend for white South Africans too. And so a whole number of the constituencies have benefited. That hasn't been without indigestion being caused, particularly in the consumer credit world, where you've seen of the new 10 million in the middle class and upper class, you've seen obviously people getting over indebted, and to some extent that's created this effect where there may be, of the 9.5 million South Africans that have some kind of consumer impairment, there may be roughly 10% of those that will become permanently indebted in the future, and so assisting those people is an important part. But that is a sort of overall picture of the population.
Lovely nutshell. But you did write a piece a couple of weeks ago about productivity, about labour legislation in South Africa. Was that drawn from the research or the results of the research?
It was partly drawn. It was a speech I gave at the BMF conference. And effectively, the content of what was reported is this problem that we have at the moment, which is that although wage inflation is important and positive for the rising of particularly the employed, the fact is that it's an unsustainable relationship to have 3% wage inflation and 4% productivity falls in the mining sector, and that in particular has to be corrected. So we have to have a productivity-linked wage environment where wages can increase, but productivity has to outpace wages in order for it to be sustainable. Otherwise, we're effectively destroying value.
And we know that. But this morning you had Pravin Gordhan with you. Did you tackle him on the issue?
Well, we jointly discussed the issues surrounding productivity. And there's two components that are important. There's one is the public sector, where there's 2 million employees, and government is the employer, and 40% of COSATU's membership is in the public sector. So they have their own government-labor relations as an employer issue to deal with, as does corporate South Africa. And so everyone needs to sort of put their shoulder to the wheel, stop finger pointing, and rise to the challenge of getting that balance in South Africa. We also talked in the report about the importance of us addressing the current account deficit and raising investment, foreign direct investment, from a sort of average $2 billion to more like 7.5, in the range of 5 to 10. And to do that, we need to have this signal sent around the environment, of which labour is one important thing. And that was certainly discussed this morning.
It's all related, isn't it? You're going to get foreign investors if they actually find it a good place to come and put their money because they think that they're going to get productivity. But we've actually got the thing
absolutely
back.
I think one of the benefits of this report, if I might say, is that it helps everyone, you know, the corporate sector, the government, and labour, to get a total picture. I think we tend to be siloed in our own little worlds. And so, you know, I think the problem, for example, in mining is if you're thinking about it being, you know, not sort of a set sort of wealth pie, and rather than growing the pie, you start talking about how do we distribute what we have amongst each other rather than growing the pie. And so the licensing regimes, you know, the regulatory regimes, the taxation regimes, the royalty, the environmental issues are dealt with in that context. If we take a total picture and we say we have to grow this mining sector, the manufacturing sector, keep the financial services sector as it has doubled, growing into the future, you know, that's then the question. How do we grow all these sectors? We want to be a $1 trillion economy in the year 2030. And to be there, we have to grow more like a 5% growth rate than a 3.3% growth rate in the next 20 years. And to do that, we need all of these partners to work together in making it happen.
Just to close off with the one point in this that really bothered me, and Gugu, you're in this age group, so it must worry you too. You're one of the people in your age group, only 30% are employed. So if you have a look at those who went to school with you between the ages of 15 and 34, 70% unemployment. That's extraordinary. How much of a crisis is that, and how much attention's been paid to it?
I think it's a significant issue South Africa must own up to, seize and deal with. And there's two examples I think that the government and the Minister of Finance in particular is right on top of this. Is one, this incentive that's been announced, the tax incentive to encourage employment of the youth in the corporate sector, which I think is a laudable initiative of the Finance Minister. And the second is a not well understood or known about experiment that is happening to get youth who are unemployed and with no real hope of being employed into the Defence Force, to learn a skill, to get a stipend, to get a uniform, and to have the dignity of serving the country and fixing the community at the same time. I think that we need to get those type initiatives to scale.
Almost like revisiting national service.
Well, I was an in-conscription campaign participant, so I'm not in favour of compulsory.
Oh, you're on the other side of the fence.
I'm not a compulsory conscription guy. But I think on a voluntary basis, if you get these people in and we get it to scale, I think we could, you know, take a lot of people off the streets. We can't have 3 million unemployed youth with no hope of working and have, you know, a sustainable situation. We have to give those people, we're coming back to hope, hope and a real chance.
Colin, I wish I'd had your brains when I was 16 years old. Because I tell you what, those 2 years in the National Service were just ridiculous. And, I guess, if I'd known you back then, you would have convinced me not to go. But thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
Really
throw
was
in Abel,
fascinating.
Alec. Throw in Abel. Throw in Abel.
We know he's going to tell us to shut up, but tell her. I mean, Abel's rights issue at half the current price. Come on, Colin.
I'm leaving now. Thanks very much.
That was Colin Coleman, partner, managing director, and head of the South African Office and Investment Banking Division for Sub-Saharan Africa. Whoa.